The sharp crack of beer splashing across worn leather made every head in the iron anchor bar snap around in unison. "Whoops! Sorry about that, darling." Sergeant Marcus Brennan, a Navy SEAL whose biceps resembled tree trunks, smirked down at the solitary woman seated at the bar, amber liquid soaking through denim fabric and pooling on the stool beneath her. Dr. Catherine Hayes, 35 years old, with honey blonde hair pulled into a careless updo, soft waves framing her face, methodically set her phone on the polished mahogany. Her hazel eyes, luminous against pale skin scattered with freckles across her nose and cheekbones, assessed the beer stain spreading across her gray cotton shirt with the exhausted resignation of someone fresh off a grueling 12-hour shift in the trauma unit. "This ain't a tourist spot, sweetheart," Brennan growled, leaning closer until his whiskey-heavy breath invaded her space. His shaved head caught the neon glow from overhead signs. The navy blue military tee stretched dangerously tight across his muscular chest. "Iron anchors for genuine warriors. Maybe you should head on home." His 4 SEAL brothers erupted with laughter, slapping palms in celebration of their teammates' performance. The entire establishment, easily 50 patrons, predominantly military personnel and veterans, pivoted to witness the unfolding spectacle. Smartphones emerged from pockets, screens illuminating with predatory anticipation. Catherine silently extracted napkins from the chrome dispenser, methodically blotting the liquid with slow, precise movements reminiscent of wound care. Brennan's laughter amplified, interpreting her silence as submission. "Hey, I'm addressing you." His massive hand locked around Catherine's wrist like a vice. Later, when dissecting the viral footage that would saturate social media, Brennan would identify this as the precise instant he'd committed the most catastrophic error of his existence. The moment his fingers contacted skin marked by a faint circular scar suspiciously resembling an old gunshot wound. If witnessing someone being publicly humiliated like this ignites your fury, don't look away from what happens next. Quick pause before we continue. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world right now, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're enjoying stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because tomorrow's episode, it goes even deeper than this. What transpired in the following seconds would become the most viewed military bar confrontation in digital history. Brennan discovered himself face down against the bar surface, his arm contorted behind his back in a flawless restraint position. The entire establishment descended into absolute silence. Nobody had witnessed Catherine's movement. Senior Chief Petty Officer Daniel Whitaker, occupying his usual corner booth while nursing his third bourbon, placed his glass down with a decisive clink. 25 years in special operations had sharpened his ability to recognize certain indicators. The way Catherine had transitioned from seated to standing, the precise geometry of the joint lock, the weight distribution that rendered a man double her size utterly immobilized. These weren't casual self-defense techniques. This was ingrained muscle memory, drilled into someone through countless repetitions in environments where mistakes meant fatality. "Release him!" Commander Patricia Sterling, the sole female Navy officer in Brennan's unit, advanced forward. Her platinum hair was secured in a regulation bun, her posture radiating the natural authority of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. "You just physically assaulted a United States Navy SEAL. Do you comprehend the magnitude of trouble you've created?" Catherine released Brennan and resumed her seat as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. She retrieved her phone, examined the screen briefly, then placed it aside. Her movements were unhurried, economical, like someone conserving energy for an extended shift ahead. Brennan pushed himself upright from the bar, his complexion flushed crimson with humiliation and rage. He massaged his wrist where Catherine's grip had left visible marks. "Lucky shot," he muttered, though his eyes betrayed genuine uncertainty. Throughout his years of specialized training, through BUDS and advanced operator courses, he'd never been neutralized that efficiently or that cleanly. "Water, please," Catherine requested from the bartender, her voice carrying a subtle Midwestern lilt that softened her consonants. "With ice," Thomas, the bartender, a former Army Ranger with complete sleeves of military ink covering both forearms, studied Catherine with renewed fascination as he filled a glass. He'd been manning the iron anchor for 3 years, had witnessed every variety of military posturing and civilian altercation conceivable. But this situation felt fundamentally different. The woman's preference for water over another beer, the way her eyes had already catalogued every exit route, every potential improvised weapon, every individual who might constitute a threat. These were instincts that couldn't be acquired in a weekend self-defense workshop. "That was Krav Maga," slurred a voice from the shadows. Gerald Thompson, a weathered veteran in his 50s wearing a faded army jacket, swayed slightly as he stood. His eyes, though clouded with alcohol, retained a penetrating sharpness suggesting he'd witnessed horrors most people only encountered in nightmares. "Military Krav Maga, not the watered-down commercial version." "Bah!" Vladimir Petrov bellowed from his table near the dartboard. The private military contractor was constructed like an industrial appliance. 250 pounds of muscle forged in conflict zones, where rules of engagement were treated as loose suggestions. His Eastern European accent thickened with amusement. "Lucky grab, nothing more. Little doctor probably watched YouTube tutorial." The word doctor rippled through the assembly like electricity. Someone had recognized Catherine from the medical center, had observed her wearing scrubs at Coronado Regional Hospital. The narrative crystallized rapidly. An exhausted healthcare professional had somehow gotten fortunate against an elite operator. The crowd's tension dissipated slightly, replaced by the familiar anticipation preceding every bar confrontation in military communities. But Catherine's true identity was about to shatter every assumption in that room. Miguel, the security personnel, 6'4" and a former Marine whose face suggested too many intimate encounters with explosive devices, shifted closer to the developing situation. But Whitaker subtly raised a hand, and Miguel paused. Something in the senior chief's expression indicated this scenario needed to resolve naturally. The entrance chimed as a newcomer rushed inside. Dr. Sarah Chen, still displaying her hospital identification badge, burst through. Her eyes immediately located Catherine, and alarm flashed across her features. She'd collaborated alongside Catherine in the trauma department for 2 years, had observed her managing everything from gang-related shootings to multi-vehicle collisions with the kind of composure that originated from somewhere far deeper than medical training. "Kate!" Sarah called out, but Catherine delivered an almost imperceptible head shake. Sarah stopped, comprehending the unspoken communication. She found a stool at the bar, close enough to assist if necessary, but distant enough to avoid escalation. "You got lucky," Brennan declared, his voice projecting throughout the establishment. He'd recovered his confidence, retreating into the bravado that had sustained him through innumerable missions. "But luck expires. How about we resolve this properly, arm wrestling right here, right now?" His teammates applauded the suggestion enthusiastically. This represented more familiar territory, a contest of pure strength where technique mattered less than raw power. Brennan had never lost an arm wrestling match within his team. His biceps rivaled most people's thighs, his forearms ropey with muscle from years of specialized conditioning. Catherine sipped her water thoughtfully. "No, thank you." Frightened. Commander Sterling interjected, her voice carrying the particular brand of condescension reserved for civilians who failed to comprehend military hierarchy. "I don't blame you. Overpowering someone in a surprise attack is one thing. Confronting them in legitimate competition is entirely different." The crowd was expanding now. Other patrons had abandoned their pool games and conversations to form a loose perimeter around the developing drama. Someone had initiated a live stream. Multiple smartphones captured every angle. In the era of viral content, a confrontation between a Navy SEAL and a civilian in a military establishment was digital gold. "Tell me something," Catherine said, rotating slightly to face Sterling. "Third phase of BUDS training, week 5. What's the standard protocol for underwater not tying when your dive buddy experiences shallow water blackout?" The question suspended in the atmosphere like a grenade with its pin removed. It was specific, excessively specific. The kind of operational detail that didn't appear in documentaries or recruitment videos. Sterling's confident expression faltered momentarily. "How would you possibly know about?" "Because the procedure they're teaching is incorrect," Catherine continued, her voice never elevating above conversational level. "The recovery position they mandate increases secondary drowning risk by 30%. Any special operations medic who's actually managed blackout scenarios in combat diving operations would understand that." What Catherine revealed next would make even the most hardened warriors question everything they thought they knew. Thomas, the bartender, had ceased polishing glassware. His hands rested on the bar, recognizing the precision in Catherine's words. This wasn't internet research or second-hand knowledge. This was operational experience. "Prove it," Thomas said, extracting a Glock 19 from beneath the bar, unloaded, reserved for teaching concealed carry classes in the back room. "You speak like you understand weapons. Let's witness it. How rapidly can you field strip this?" Catherine glanced at the weapon, then back at Thomas. 17 seconds with proper tools, 23 without." 23 seconds, Thomas scoffed. "The range record here is 32 seconds, established by a SEAL Team 6 operator." He slid the weapon across the bar. "Demonstrate." In her medical bag beneath her feet, Catherine's professional equipment included portable cardiac monitoring technology featuring military-grade specifications capable of functioning in the harshest environmental conditions. The medical diagnostic device had been engineered for battlefield medics, providing hospital-grade monitoring capabilities in a compact, shock-resistant, and waterproof package meeting stringent military standards. Catherine lifted the Glock with her left hand, her right still gripping the water glass. What transpired next would be replayed millions of times across social media platforms, analyzed frame by weapons specialists and military enthusiasts globally. Her movements were economical, precise, almost mundane in their efficiency. There was no theatricality, no grandstanding, just the systematic disassembly of a firearm by someone who had performed this action so frequently that muscle memory had superseded conscious thought. The slide separated, the barrel lifted free, the recoil spring assembly divided. Each component was positioned on the bar in a perfect line, oriented exactly as military armorers were trained to arrange them. 15.4 seconds, Thomas announced, his voice blending disbelief and respect. With one hand, the bar had descended into complete silence except for classic rock playing softly through the speakers. Even the pool players had frozen mid-game. Brennan stood paralyzed, his arm wrestling challenge forgotten in the face of a demonstration suggesting depths he hadn't considered. "You smell like death," Thompson announced, weaving closer, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Catherine with the intensity of someone recognizing a kindred spirit in darkness. "Not hospital death, the other kind. The kind that clings to you in places where the Geneva Convention is just toilet paper." "That's sufficient, old man," Petrov declared, rising from his table, His massive frame cast elongated shadows across the floor as he approached. Smart-mouthed doctor needs lesson in respect. In my homeland, we have methods for dealing with women who forget their position. The tension in the establishment ratcheted up another level. Miguel moved his hand closer to the baseball bat kept behind the entrance. Sarah half rose from her seat, but Catherine remained perfectly motionless, only the slight adjustment of her feet beneath the bar stool suggesting she was even paying attention. What happened in the next 4 seconds would be discussed in combat forums for years to come. When Petrov moved, it was with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a fight that mattered. His grab was textbook private military contractor, direct, brutal, designed to establish immediate physical dominance. His hand reached for Catherine's shoulder, intending to spin her around forcibly. The next 4 seconds would be analyzed in combat forums and military analysis blogs for years. Catherine didn't block the grab. Instead, she moved with it, utilizing Petrov's own momentum against him. Her body rotated, her weight shifted, and suddenly the massive contractor found himself off balance. A foot swept his ankle, an elbow located his solar plexus with surgical precision. His diaphragm spasmed, severing his oxygen supply. By the time his brain processed what was happening, he was already on the floor, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Catherine hadn't stood up. She remained seated on her bar stool, water glass in hand, as if the entire sequence had been nothing more than swatting away a persistent insect. But those watching closely, and the cameras captured everything, saw details that told a different narrative. The way her feet had repositioned, the micro-adjustments in her posture, the fact that she'd struck 3 specific pressure points in a sequence that spoke of advanced close-quarters combat training. "Who taught you that?" The voice originated from the entrance where Colonel Benjamin Graves had just entered with his entourage. He was old-school military, the kind of officer who'd earned his rank in places the media never reported on. His eyes fixed on Catherine with the intensity of a predator recognizing another predator. Catherine rotated slowly to face him. For the first time since the encounter began, something shifted in her expression. Not fear, not concern, but a weariness suggesting she'd hoped to avoid this moment. The colonel advanced closer, his aide flanking him. The bar patrons parted like the Red Sea. This wasn't just any officer. This was Colonel Benjamin Graves, commander of Naval Special Warfare Group 1. The man who decided which SEALs received the missions that mattered. "I asked you a question," Graves repeated. "That takedown, that's not standard close-quarters combat. That's not even special operations standard. That's something else entirely." In the corner, Senior Chief Whitaker was already on his phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. His weathered face had gone pale beneath its permanent tan. He'd recognized something in that 4-second sequence. Something that connected to briefings in rooms where recording devices were prohibited and names were never used. Brennan had located his courage again, bolstered by the presence of senior command. He moved to stand with his teammates, forming a loose semicircle that effectively trapped Catherine between them and the bar. It wasn't overtly threatening. They were too well trained for such obvious intimidation, but the message was unmistakable. The question Brennan asked next would change everything in that bar forever. "Everyone who's served has a call sign," Brennan announced loud enough for the entire establishment to hear, his confidence returning now that he had backup. "If you're who you claim to be, some kind of operator, then you'll have one, so let's hear it. What's your call sign?" Catherine set down her water glass with deliberate care. The ice cubes clinked against the sides, the sound somehow carrying in the tense silence. She looked at Brennan, then at Sterling, then at the colonel. Her hazel eyes held something that made even these hardened warriors unconsciously shift their stances. "I don't have a call sign," she said finally. "Bullshit," Sterling interjected. "Everyone in special operations has a call sign. It's not optional. It's part of the culture, the identity. You're lying." The crowd murmured agreement. This was common knowledge in military circles. Call signs were as fundamental to military aviation and special operations as ranks and serial numbers. They were earned through notable events, embarrassing moments, or characteristics that defined an operator among their peers. To claim advanced training without a call sign was like claiming to be a surgeon without knowing what a scalpel was. Outside, through the bar's tinted windows, a black SUV screeched to a halt in the parking lot, engine still running as someone inside made a phone call that would change everything about to unfold in the Iron Anchor bar. Brennan pressed closer, his fellow SEALs flanking him. They had Catherine surrounded now, 5 elite operators forming a human wall between her and any exit. The message was clear. This conversation wasn't ending until they had answers. "Last chance," Brennan said, his voice dropping to a growl. "Tell us your call sign or we're going to assume you're just another wannabe trying to play soldier. And trust me, we don't take kindly to stolen valor in this establishment." The atmosphere in the bar had shifted from entertainment to something more primal. This wasn't just about a confrontation anymore. It was about identity, honor, and the sacred boundaries that separated those who had served from those who merely claimed to. When situations escalate beyond control, Catherine utilized her specially reinforced smartphone featuring military-grade encryption and satellite connectivity, ensuring secure communications even in remote locations. This technology enabled encrypted data transmission under any conditions, with a sapphire-reinforced screen and battery lasting 72 continuous hours in extreme environments. Whitaker set his phone down, his call completed. Whatever he'd heard on the other end had changed everything. He stood from his corner booth, his movements careful and deliberate. At 6 feet tall with the build of someone who'd spent decades in physical conditioning, his presence commanded attention even in a room full of elite warriors. "Stand down, Lieutenant," Whitaker ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd given commands in situations where following them meant the difference between living and dying. Brennan turned, confusion evident on his face. "Senior Chief, this woman just—" "I said stand down." Whitaker's tone brooked no argument. "All of you, step back, now." The SEALs hesitated, caught between loyalty to their teammate and their training to obey senior enlisted personnel. Whitaker had been a legend in the teams before his retirement, the kind of operator whose name was spoken in hushed tones in team rooms across the world. But Brennan's pride wouldn't let him back down so easily. "She's lying about who she is, Senior Chief. She needs to answer the question, what's her call sign? She is mine." The words that came through the door next would make hardened warriors' blood run cold. The front door of the Iron Anchor burst open with enough force to make everyone jump. Admiral James Morrison stood in the doorway, still in civilian clothes, jeans and a polo shirt that did nothing to diminish the command presence radiating from every fiber of his being. He was breathing hard, as if he'd run from his vehicle. His eyes swept the room in a tactical assessment that took less than 2 seconds, found Catherine, noted her position, the surrounding SEALs, the contractor still gasping on the floor, then locked onto her face, and something profound shifted in his expression. Catherine met his gaze, and for the first time since the evening began, her carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. Her shoulders tensed. Her hands, which had been perfectly still throughout the confrontation, trembled slightly, not with fear but with something deeper. Recognition, memory, the weight of a past that wouldn't stay buried. "Admiral," Colonel Graves began, clearly confused by the sudden appearance of flag-rank brass at what should have been a simple bar incident. "We have a situation here. This woman—" Morrison held up a hand, silencing the colonel mid-sentence. He took 3 steps into the bar, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face. The silence was absolute now. Even the music seemed to have faded into the background. "Say it," Brennan demanded, emboldened by what he perceived as Catherine being cornered by the highest levels of military authority. "Tell everyone your call sign or admit you're a fraud." Catherine stood slowly from her bar stool. At 5'6", she should have been dwarfed by the SEALs surrounding her. Instead, something in her posture, in the way she planted her feet and squared her shoulders, made her seem larger, more dangerous, like a compressed spring containing energy that could reshape the entire room if released. She looked directly at Brennan, her hazel eyes holding his with an intensity that made him want to step back. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried to every corner of the now silent bar. "Shadow!" The effect was immediate and devastating. Brennan had been raising a beer bottle to his lips, a gesture of dismissive confidence as he waited for what he assumed would be another lie. The bottle never made it. His hand froze mid-motion, the muscles in his arm locking as if electrocuted. The beer slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, falling in what seemed like slow motion. The bottle hit the floor with a crash that shattered the silence. Golden liquid spread across the worn wooden boards, mixing with foam as the bar erupted in chaos. But Brennan didn't move. He stood frozen, his face draining of color so quickly that Sarah, with her medical training, moved instinctively closer in case he fainted. "Holy Mother of..." Whitaker's voice cut through the shock. His phone clattered onto the table as he took an involuntary step backward. 25 years of special operations experience, missions in every conflict zone on the planet, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. The reaction rippled outward like a shockwave. Sterling's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with the kind of recognition that came from classified briefings and need-to-know operations. Thomas dropped the glass he'd been polishing, crystals shattering on the floor behind the bar. Even Colonel Graves, who had maintained his composure through 20 years of combat operations, visibly staggered. "No." Thompson gasped from his corner, falling to his knees with the gracelessness of someone whose legs had simply stopped working, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Catherine with something approaching religious awe. "The Phantom Sniper! You're the Phantom Sniper!" Petrov, still struggling to breathe on the floor, managed to lift his head. Even through his pain, recognition was clear on his face. In the private military contractor community, certain names transcended normal operations. They became legends, cautionary tales, benchmarks of what was possible when skill met will in the crucible of combat. "That's impossible," Graves said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You died at Operation Sandstorm. The whole unit was listed as KIA. I read the after-action report myself." Admiral Morrison moved forward and then did something that sent another shockwave through the bar. This two-star admiral, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, dropped to one knee in front of Cat. "Master Chief Shadow," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't recognize you immediately." What the Admiral revealed next would make this the most viral military bar incident in internet history. The bar erupted. Phones that had been recording suddenly became the most important devices in the room. The live streams that had been expecting to capture a simple bar fight were now broadcasting something extraordinary. The comment sections exploded with disbelief, recognition, and frantic searches for information about Shadow. Every phone in the bar was now pointed at Catherine. The various angles would later be compiled into a single video that would rack up 50 million views in its first 48 hours. The moment when a tired emergency room doctor was revealed to be the most lethal sniper in United States Special Operations history. Brennan's legs finally gave out. He sank onto a bar stool, his massive frame suddenly looking deflated. The beer from his dropped bottle had reached his boots, but he didn't notice. His mind was struggling to reconcile the woman in front of him with the stories he'd heard in classified briefings. 134 confirmed kills, someone whispered from the crowd. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. You're the only female operator to ever complete Delta Force selection, Sterling managed, her voice barely more than a croak. The only woman to serve as a primary sniper for Task Force Black. Operation Sandstorm, Whitaker added, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd lost friends in that desert. October 18, 2014, classified as the single most successful failed operation in Special Operations history. Morrison stood slowly, his knees protesting the movement. Age and rank hadn't diminished his physical presence, but the emotional weight of the moment was clear on his weathered face. He turned to address the bar, his voice carrying the authority of command. "What you're about to hear doesn't leave this room," he began, though everyone present knew that ship had already sailed. The live streams were broadcasting to thousands, soon to be millions. Master Chief Catherine Hayes, call sign Shadow, is the most decorated female operator in United States military history. And until 10 years ago, she didn't officially exist. The silence that followed was different from the shocked quiet of moments before. This was the silence of recognition, of understanding that they were in the presence of something extraordinary. Catherine remained standing, her posture unchanged despite the weight of every eye in the room. The tremor in her hands from earlier had stilled. She looked exactly like what she had pretended to be, a tired healthcare worker at the end of a long shift. Except now everyone could see what had been hidden in plain sight. The way she stood with perfect balance despite her apparent exhaustion, the scars on her arms that weren't from medical accidents but from battlefield wounds, the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen humanity at its worst and chosen to spend her life trying to heal rather than harm. "Operation Sandstorm," Morrison continued, his voice heavy with the burden of command decisions that haunted him a decade later. 6 operators inserted into eastern Afghanistan to extract 73 civilians, aid workers and their families from a compound that was about to be overrun by Taliban forces. Intel said light resistance, minimal enemy presence. He paused, swallowing hard. The room waited, tension building like pressure in a steam engine. Intel was wrong. It was a trap. 300 Taliban fighters, heavy weapons. The compound was surrounded before our team even landed. 5 of the 6 operators were killed in the first 15 minutes of the firefight. Every military person in the room knew what those numbers meant, 300 to 1. In military terms, it wasn't a fight, it was a death sentence. The fact that anyone had survived, let alone completed the mission, defied every principle of tactical planning. But what Catherine did next became the stuff of legend. "Shadow held that compound for 16 hours, Morrison's voice cracked slightly. Alone. Against an entire Taliban battalion. She saved all 73 civilians, got them to the extraction point, provided cover while they loaded onto helicopters. And she did it after watching her entire team, her family, die in front of her." The weight of those words settled over the bar like a shroud. Brennan looked like he might be sick. Sterling had tears running down her cheeks, her military bearing forgotten in the face of such sacrifice. Even Petrov, finally able to breathe normally, had managed to prop himself up against a table leg, his expression one of profound respect. "Jamil," Catherine spoke for the first time since revealing her call sign. The name carried weight, memory, pain compressed into 2 syllables. 8 years old, his sister Aaliyah was 6. They were in the last group to evacuate. Aaliyah had been shot in the leg. Jamil wouldn't leave her. She paused, her hazel eyes focusing on something beyond the walls of the bar, beyond the present moment. "I carried them both. 200 meters of open ground. Every Taliban fighter in the valley was shooting at us. Jamil kept saying, 'I'll be brave, miss, I'll be brave like you.' He was 8 years old, and he was trying to comfort me while bullets were striking all around us." Sarah, who had seen Catherine save countless lives in the ER, finally understood where that supernatural calm came from. It wasn't training, it wasn't experience. It was the peace that came from having already faced the worst humanity could offer and choosing to keep going anyway. The official report lists you as KIA, Graves said, his earlier antagonism replaced by something approaching reverence. How? Because I was supposed to be, Catherine interrupted. 67 wounds, shrapnel, bullets, blast injuries. I died twice on the medevac, spent 8 months at Walter Reed under an assumed name. When I finally got out, everyone I had served with was gone. My team was dead. My identity was classified beyond even acknowledgement. So Master Chief Catherine Hayes died in that valley, and I became just Catherine, a doctor, someone who saves lives instead of taking them. The profound nature of that transformation, from the most lethal sniper in special operations to an emergency room physician, wasn't lost on anyone present. It was a rejection of everything that had defined her, a choice to heal rather than harm, a choice to live a quiet life of purpose rather than seeking glory and recognition. A phone rang, cutting through the moment like a blade. Catherine pulled her device from her pocket, not a normal smartphone, but one with modifications that suggested capabilities beyond civilian specifications. She looked at the caller ID, and for the second time that evening her composure cracked. She answered on the second ring. Night. The voice on the other end was audible only to her, but whatever was being said drained what little color remained in her face. When? Catherine asked, her voice steady despite the tremor that had returned to her hands. She listened, her jaw tightening with each word. How many? A pause. Understood, send me the intel package. She ended the call and stood there for a moment, the phone hanging loose in her hand. The bar waited, sensing that something fundamental had shifted yet again. That was Langley, Morrison said. It wasn't a question. Only one organization could put that particular expression on the face of someone who'd stared down 300 enemy fighters without flinching. Catherine nodded slowly. Jamil, the boy from Sandstorm, he's 18 now, been running a school for girls in Kabul with his sister. The Taliban grabbed him 3 days ago. The implications hit everyone simultaneously, and what Catherine had to decide next would test everything she'd become. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The child whose life Catherine had saved at the cost of everything she was now needed saving again. They want him as leverage, Catherine continued, her voice gaining strength. He's become a symbol, the boy who survived Sandstorm, the one who grew up to build schools where the Taliban burned them. They're going to execute him publicly in 72 hours. Unless Shadow comes back from the dead, Morrison finished. The bar held its collective breath. This wasn't just about the past anymore. This was about the present, the future, and the impossible choice facing a woman who'd already given everything once before. Catherine's insurance profile included a comprehensive high-tier life insurance policy designed specifically for medical professionals and military veterans, providing extensive coverage up to millions of dollars. This program was specially designed for those with exceptional service histories, including PTSD treatment and combat injury coverage. Brennan found his voice, though it came out hoarse and uncertain. You can't. You're a civilian now, a doctor. You save lives in hospitals, not in places where hospitals don't exist. Catherine turned to face him fully. The quiet doctor was still there, but now everyone could see what lay beneath, the operator who had redefined what was possible in modern warfare. You think I chose emergency medicine by accident? She asked. Every gunshot wound that comes through those doors, every trauma victim, every person bleeding out on my table, I see my team. I see the 73 civilians I saved. I see Jamil and Aaliyah, and I try to balance the scales. But the scales never balance, Thompson said from his position on the floor. Despite his intoxication, he'd found clarity in this moment. They never do, not for people like us. Sterling wiped her face with the back of her hand, her military bearing reasserting itself. What do you need? The question hung in the air, representing a fundamental shift in the room's dynamics. These weren't antagonists anymore. They were potential allies, drawn together by the recognition of something greater than ego or pride. Catherine looked around the room, taking in the faces watching her, SEALs who had moments ago been trying to humiliate her, a contractor who tried to physically dominate her, officers who had questioned her very existence. And in every face she saw the same thing, understanding, recognition that some fights transcended personal grievances. "I need to make a call," she said finally. "And then I need to disappear for a while." Morrison nodded. "Whatever you need, full support, unofficial of course." "Officially, Shadow is still dead," Catherine agreed. "She needs to stay that way, at least on paper." Whitaker stepped forward, pulling a worn challenge coin from his pocket. It wasn't his SEAL coin or his Master Chief coin. It was something older, more worn, with markings that predated the War on Terror. "Task Force Black," he said simply, placing the coin on the bar in front of Catherine. "My brother was there, Sergeant First Class Ryan Whitaker. You knew him as Maverick." Catherine's hand hesitated over the coin. When she picked it up, her fingers traced the worn edges with the reverence of someone handling a holy relic. "He talked about you all the time," she said softly. "Said his little brother was going to be the best Master Chief the Navy ever had. He was right." The moment of connection between past and present, between the living and the dead, between who Catherine had been and who she'd become, resonated through everyone present. This wasn't just about one woman's hidden identity anymore. It was about the bonds that connected all of them, the invisible threads of service and sacrifice that transcended rank and rivalry. Outside, more vehicles were arriving. The parking lot of the Iron Anchor was filling with black SUVs and unmarked sedans. Whatever Catherine's phone call had set in motion was happening fast. "I should go," Catherine said, but Brennan stepped forward, not aggressively this time, but with the hesitant movements of someone approaching a dangerous animal they had accidentally provoked. "I'm sorry," he said, the words seeming to physically pain him. "I'm sorry for the beer, for the disrespect, for everything. I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to know," Catherine replied. "That was the point." "But I should have seen it," Brennan insisted, self-recrimination clear in his voice. "The way you moved, the knowledge, I let my ego blind me. My teammates and I, we dishonored ourselves tonight." Catherine studied him for a moment, then surprised everyone by placing a hand on his massive shoulder. Despite the size difference, it was Brennan who seemed smaller in that moment. "You're a good operator," she said. "Your file says so." 3 bronze stars, 2 purple hearts, multiple successful operations in Iraq and Syria. But being good at the job isn't the same as understanding what the job costs. Tonight you learned something. The question is what you do with that lesson. She moved past him, heading for the door, but Sterling called out, "Wait, the mission, Jamal, you can't do it alone, not again." Catherine paused at the door, her hand on the handle. When she looked back, there was something in her expression that made everyone in the room stand a little straighter. "I've been alone for 10 years, she said. "But Jamal isn't alone. He's got his sister, his students, his community. They're all counting on him to come home, just like those 73 people counted on me to get them home 10 years ago." "The difference is," Morrison said, understanding what she wasn't saying, "this time you don't have to do it alone. This time you've got support." "Unofficial support," Graves added quickly, the career officer in him asserting itself. "Completely deniable, but support nonetheless." Catherine nodded once, a gesture that somehow conveyed gratitude, determination, and farewell all at once. Then she was gone, moving through the door with the same quiet efficiency she displayed all evening. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like finality. But this story was far from over. What happened next would become the most daring rescue mission in special operations history. The bar remained frozen for several seconds after her departure. Then, as if a spell had been broken, everyone moved at once. Phones came out, not to post on social media, but to delete recordings. The live streams that had been broadcasting cut off abruptly. There was an unspoken understanding that what they'd witnessed needed to be protected, not exploited. Brennan stood staring at the door, his entire worldview reconstructed in the span of an hour. "We're going to help," he said. It wasn't a question. "We don't even know where she's going," Sterling pointed out, "or what the plan is, or if there even is a plan." "Doesn't matter," Brennan replied. "We owe her, I owe her. For tonight, for what she did at Sandstorm, for every life she saved since then while we've been strutting around bars acting like we're God's gift to warfare." Whitaker picked up his challenge coin from where Catherine had left it on the bar. The metal was warm, as if it had absorbed something from her touch. "I know people," he said simply. "People who remember Shadow, people who have been waiting 10 years for a chance to repay what she did for their friends, their units, their families." Morrison had his phone out, already making calls. His voice carried the kind of authority that moved mountains and rearranged bureaucracies. "I need a secure line to JSOC. Yes, now. Authorization Tango 77 Sandstorm." The transformation of the iron anchor bar from a scene of confrontation to an impromptu operations center was remarkable. Tables were pushed together. Laptops appeared. Maps were pulled up on phones. The same people who'd been ready to fight each other an hour ago were now working together with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. "Listen up," Morrison announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the bar. "What happened here tonight doesn't leave this room. The videos get deleted. The stories don't get told. As far as the world is concerned, Catherine Hayes is still just an ER doctor who knows some self-defense. Shadow stays dead. Understood?" The chorus of agreement was immediate and absolute. Even Petrov, now back on his feet and nursing his bruised ribs, nodded firmly. Outside, Catherine sat in her 10-year-old Honda Civic, engine running but the gear still in park. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white with tension. The facade of calm she'd maintained throughout the evening finally cracked, and she allowed herself 30 seconds of vulnerability. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message, the intel package from Langley. She opened it, her trained eye absorbing the details with professional detachment. Satellite images of a compound in eastern Afghanistan, the same region where she'd lost everything 10 years ago. Photos of Jamal, no longer the terrified 8-year-old she'd carried to safety, but a young man with kind eyes and his sister's stubborn chin. Intelligence estimates of enemy strength, probable execution date and location. It was impossible. A single operator, even one with her skills, couldn't pull off an extraction from that compound. It would take a full team, resources, support that she no longer had access to. It would take, her phone rang again, Whitaker's number. "You've got 12 operators ready to roll," he said without preamble. "All volunteers, all with Tier 1 experience, transportations being arranged, equipments being sourced. Admiral Morrison's handling the diplomatic side. Colonel Graves is running interference with the Pentagon." Catherine closed her eyes, feeling something she hadn't experienced in a decade, the weight of not being alone. "Why?" she asked. "Because Shadow saved 73 lives when everyone said it was impossible," Whitaker replied. "Because Master Chief Hayes showed us tonight that some people are worth believing in. Because Jamal was 8 years old and tried to be brave for you, and now it's our turn to be brave for him." In the rearview mirror, Catherine could see operators streaming out of the iron anchor, moving with purpose toward their vehicles. Brennan was among them, his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing as he coordinated something. Sterling was with him, her earlier antagonism transformed into determined efficiency. These were the same people who'd tried to humiliate her an hour ago. Now they were risking careers, clearances, possibly their lives because they'd learned the truth about who she was and what she'd sacrificed. "Tell them to stand down," Catherine said. "This isn't their fight." "With respect, Master Chief," Whitaker replied, "that's not how this works. You showed us tonight what real service looks like, what real sacrifice means. You don't get to carry that alone anymore. Jamal needs you, yes, but you need us. And we need this, the chance to be part of something that matters." Catherine's hand moved to her neck where dog tags hadn't hung in 10 years. The weight of command, of responsibility for others' lives, settled back onto her shoulders like an old, familiar burden. "If we do this," she said slowly, "we do it right. No cowboys, no glory seeking. We get Jamil and his sister out, and we all come home. Everyone comes home this time." "Roger that, Shadow," Whitaker said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Everyone comes home." As Catherine put the car in gear and pulled out of the parking lot, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the rearview mirror. For just a moment, she didn't see the tired ER doctor. She saw the operator she'd tried to bury, the warrior who had refused to die when death was the only reasonable option. "Jamil," she said to the empty car, "I told you I'd always watch over you. I'm coming, little brother. Hold on just a little longer." 72 hours later, the impossible became reality. 3 days later, a nondescript cargo plane touched down at Bagram Airfield under cover of darkness. Officially, it didn't exist. The flight logs would show a routine supply run that never happened, carrying equipment that was never there, for a mission that would never be acknowledged. Catherine stepped off the ramp, and for a moment the decade fell away. The smell of aviation fuel mixed with desert dust, the distant sound of rotor blades, the weight of tactical gear settling across her shoulders like an old friend she'd hoped never to meet again. She'd traded her scrubs for multi-cam fatigues that bore no insignia, no name tape, nothing that could identify her if things went wrong. "Shadow, welcome back to the sandbox," Whitaker said, materializing from the shadows beside a line of vehicles. He wore the same non-standard gear, the same carefully blank uniform. Behind him stood 11 more figures, Brennan, Sterling, and 9 others who'd answered the call, not as active duty personnel, but as private citizens taking a very dangerous vacation. The transformation in Brennan was remarkable. Gone was the cocky SEAL who'd spilled beer on a stranger. In his place stood a professional operator who'd spent 72 hours arranging logistics, weapons, and intelligence with the kind of focus usually reserved for national-level operations. "Sit rep," Catherine said, falling back into the clipped efficiency of military communication as naturally as breathing. "Jamil's being held in a compound 20 clicks northeast of our position," Whitaker replied, unfolding a tablet showing satellite imagery. "Same region as Sandstorm, different valley." The Taliban learned from last time. They've got early warning positions here, and here. Any air assault gets detected 15 minutes out. "They're expecting you," Sterling added, her antagonism from the bar completely forgotten in the face of operational planning. "Specifically you, they've been broadcasting messages for 3 days. The ghost of Sandstorm will watch another family die. They want you to come." Catherine studied the imagery, her mind already calculating angles, distances, probabilities. The compound was a fortress, high walls, limited access points, surrounded by high ground that provided perfect positions for enemy fighters. It was a death trap disguised as a rescue mission. "They've got more than Jamil," Brennan said. "Aaliyah's there too, plus 12 other teachers from their school, all women, all sentenced to death for teaching girls to read." The weight of that settled over the group. This wasn't just about one life anymore. It was about 14 lives, and the message their deaths would send to anyone else brave enough to educate girls in Taliban territory. Catherine traced her finger along the satellite image, marking positions with the precision of someone who could see the battlefield in 3 dimensions. "Standard assault won't work," she said. "They'll execute everyone at the first sign of approach. We need something else." "What did you have in mind?" Whitaker asked. For the first time in days, Catherine smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "They want the ghost of Sandstorm," she said. "Let's give them exactly what they're expecting." The planning session that followed would have made military colleges rewrite their textbooks. Catherine laid out an approach that was equal parts brilliant and insane, using the Taliban's own trap against them, turning their strength into weakness. It relied on split-second timing, absolute trust between team members, and a willingness to walk into hell with nothing but skill and determination as armor. 48 hours later, as dawn painted the Hindu Kush mountains in shades of blood and gold, a lone figure walked across the valley floor toward the Taliban compound. Catherine moved with deliberate slowness, her hands visible and empty, her path taking her directly toward the main gate. She wore no armor, carried no visible weapons, just walked with the measured pace of someone approaching their own execution. The Taliban fighters saw her coming from a kilometer away. Radios crackled with excited chatter. The ghost of Sandstorm, the woman who'd humiliated them a decade ago, walking into their trap exactly as planned. Fighters scrambled to positions, weapons trained on the lone figure approaching across open ground. In hidden positions around the valley, 12 operators watched through scopes as Catherine played bait. Each had their assigned sectors, their specific targets, their moment to act. But everything depended on Catherine selling the deception, that she'd come alone, driven by guilt and desperation, to trade her life for Jamal's. She reached the compound's outer perimeter where a line of fighters waited with weapons raised. One of them, clearly the leader, stepped forward. His face bore the scars of old battles, and his eyes held the kind of hatred that time only sharpens. "Shadow," he said in accented English. "The ghost who should have died with her team, you received our invitation." "I'm here for Jamal," Catherine replied, her voice carrying across the morning air. "Let the others go. You want me. You've always wanted me. One life for 14. The commander laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the compound walls. "You think you have leverage. You walk into our home with nothing and demand terms." He gestured to the walls where more fighters appeared, weapons trained on her. "You will watch them die, all of them, starting with the boy you saved before, then you will beg for death yourself." 17 seconds, Catherine said quietly, the words barely audible. The commander leaned forward, confused. "What? That's how long you have to surrender," Catherine continued, her voice gaining strength. 17 seconds before you understand what you've done." 16:15. The commander's confusion turned to rage. He raised his rifle, pointing it directly at Catherine's head. Around the compound, over 100 Taliban fighters tightened their grips on their weapons, waiting for the order to fire. 10, Catherine continued. 9, 8. High above, Brennan lay prone on a ridge, his crosshair centered on the commander's head. Through his earpiece came Whitaker's voice, calm and steady. "All teams stand by on Shadow's mark." 5, 4. Catherine's count never wavered, even with a rifle barrel inches from her face. 3, 2. The commander's finger moved to the trigger. 1. What happened next became the most precise military operation in modern special operations history. The world exploded into controlled chaos. Brennan's shot took the commander in the head before he could fire. Simultaneously, 11 other rifles spoke from concealed positions, each shot finding its mark with surgical precision. The Taliban's outer security collapsed in seconds, fighters falling before they could process what was happening. But Catherine was already moving. The moment Brennan fired, she rolled left, her hand finding the pistol concealed in the small of her back. 3 shots, 3 targets, each placed with the economy of motion that had made her legendary. She moved through the compound entrance like water flowing around rocks, using the confusion and fallen bodies as cover. Inside the compound, alarms wailed. Fighters scrambled for positions, but their carefully planned trap had become a cage. Every exit they'd used to prevent escape now channeled them into kill zones where Whitaker's team waited. The high ground they'd occupied to prevent air assault now left them exposed to precision fire from operators who'd spent 2 days mapping every position. Catherine moved through the compound's interior with purpose, her mental map guiding her toward the prisoner holding area. Behind her, the systematic elimination of resistance continued. Not the wild firefight the Taliban had expected, but a methodical dismantling of their defenses by operators who had trained for exactly this scenario. She found them in a basement cell, 14 figures huddled together in the darkness. Jamal was there, no longer the 8-year-old boy she'd carried, but a young man whose eyes still held the same determination. Aaliyah beside him, her leg bearing old scars from that day at Sandstorm, and 12 women, teachers whose only crime was believing girls deserved education. "I told you I'd always watch over you," Catherine said, producing bolt cutters from her vest. Jamal's eyes widened with recognition, then filled with tears. "Shadow, but they said you died, they said." "Later," Catherine interrupted, cutting through the chains. "Can everyone move?" The extraction that followed was everything Sandstorm hadn't been. No desperate last stands, no impossible odds, just 14 civilians moving through a compound where resistance had been systematically eliminated, protected by operators who'd learned from the past. Brennan and Sterling provided cover as they moved. Whitaker coordinated the withdrawal. Each team member played their role with the precision of a Swiss watch. They reached the extraction point, a plateau where 2 helicopters waited, rotors already turning. As the civilians loaded, Catherine did a head count, her old habits asserting themselves. 13, 14, everyone accounted for. This time, everyone would make it home. But as she turned to board the helicopter, movement in her peripheral vision made her freeze. A young Taliban fighter, no more than 16, stumbled from behind cover. Blood covered half his face from a grazing wound. His hands shook as he raised an ancient AK-47, the barrel wavering between Catherine and the helicopter full of civilians. Time slowed. Catherine could draw and fire before he could steady his aim. Every instinct, every hour of training demanded she eliminate the threat. But she saw something in his eyes, not hatred, not ideology, just fear. The same fear she'd seen in Jamal's eyes 10 years ago. Instead of shooting, Catherine did something that would haunt and define her remaining years. She lowered her weapon and spoke in Pashto, "Go home to your mother." The boy's finger trembled on the trigger. Around her, Catherine could feel her team's tension, weapons tracking the young fighter. One word from her and he'd cease to exist. But she held their fire with a raised hand, maintaining eye contact with the boy. "This war has taken enough children," she continued in Pashto. "Go home, live, choose a different path." For an endless moment, the tableau held. The legendary American sniper and a child soldier, weapons lowered, separated by 20 feet and a lifetime of different choices. Then the boy's weapon dropped, hanging loose in his hands. He stepped backward, then turned and ran, disappearing into the morning shadows. "Mount up," Whitaker called, and Catherine turned to find her entire team watching her with expressions ranging from disbelief to profound respect. Brennan extended a hand, pulling her into the helicopter as the rotors spun up. As they lifted off, Catherine looked back at the compound where she'd lost everything 10 years ago. Smoke rose from scattered fires, but the mission was complete. No American casualties, 14 lives saved. The ghost of Sandstorm had returned, not for revenge, but for redemption. But the journey wasn't over. Catherine's decision to spare that young fighter would echo in ways no one could predict. The flight to safety was silent except for the rotor noise. Jamal sat beside Catherine, his hand finding hers and gripping it with the same trust he'd shown as an 8-year-old. But now their positions were reversed. He was the one offering comfort, sensing the weight of what she'd just done. "The boy with the rifle," Aaliyah said quietly, speaking for the first time. "Why didn't you shoot him?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the mountains flowing beneath them. When she answered, her voice carried a decade of accumulated wisdom and pain. "Because I've killed enough. Because every enemy fighter was once someone's child. Because choosing not to kill when you can is sometimes harder than pulling the trigger when you must." The helicopters touched down at a forward operating base where officially they'd never been. The civilians would be processed, given new identities, relocated somewhere the Taliban couldn't reach. The operators would disperse, returning to lives where this mission would exist only in their memories and in bonds forged under fire. But first came the goodbyes. Jamal stood before Catherine, now eye to eye with the woman who had saved him twice. He wore the expression of someone trying to find words for the inexpressible. "You gave me life twice," he said finally. "How do I repay that?" "You already have," Catherine replied. "Every girl who learned to read in your school, every mind you opened, every life you changed, that's the repayment." She paused, then added, "Keep teaching, Jamal. That's how we really win this war." The team dispersed over the next hour. Sterling surprised everyone by hugging Catherine, whispering, "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." Brennan stood at attention and rendered a perfect salute. No words necessary between warriors who'd shared a crucible. Whitaker was the last to leave. He handed Catherine an envelope, worn and official looking. "What's this?" she asked. "Your discharge papers," he said. "The real ones. Turns out there was a clerical error 10 years ago. Master Chief Catherine Hayes was never officially deceased, just missing in action. This makes your retirement official, with full honors and benefits." Catherine stared at the papers, seeing her name in print on official documentation for the first time in a decade. The resurrection of an identity she'd thought lost forever. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll go back to saving lives in the ER," Whitaker replied. "Say you'll find some peace. Say you'll let us buy you a beer at Iron Anchor when we get home." 6 months later, Catherine stood in her apartment in San Diego, packing boxes for a move. The emergency room had offered her a promotion, head of trauma services, with a mandate to develop new protocols for treating combat injuries in civilian settings. It meant responsibility, visibility, and end to the anonymous existence she'd cultivated. Her phone rang, an unknown number with an international prefix. "Hello, Miss Shadow." The voice was young, female, hesitant, with heavily accented English. "My name is Farida. I was student in Jamal's school. I am calling to say I got accepted to medical school in London. Full scholarship." Catherine sank onto her couch, the phone pressed to her ear as Farida continued. "Jamal said you were doctor who saved lives. He said women can be warriors in different ways. I want to be like you, save lives, not take them. Thank you for saving our teachers. Thank you for showing us strength has many faces." After the call ended, Catherine sat in the gathering dusk, surrounded by boxes containing the pieces of a life rebuilt. On her coffee table lay 3 items. The challenge coin Whitaker had given her, a photo of her old Delta Force team, and a new photo. 14 teachers and students standing in front of a rebuilt school, Jamal and Aaliyah in the center, all of them alive and free. Her phone buzzed with a text from Brennan. "Team dinner at Iron Anchor tomorrow, 1900 hours. That's an order, Master Chief." Catherine smiled, a real smile this time, and typed back, "Copy that, but I'm buying the first round." As night fell over San Diego, Catherine Hayes, emergency room doctor, former Delta Force sniper, call sign Shadow, prepared for her new life. One where she didn't have to hide who she'd been, where her past informed her future instead of haunting it, where the skills that had made her legendary in warfare could be transformed into tools for healing. But on her kitchen counter, beside her hospital ID and car keys, lay something that suggested the story wasn't quite over. A single sheet of paper delivered that morning by a courier who hadn't waited for a signature. The letterhead was one she recognized, an organization that didn't officially exist, dealing with problems that couldn't officially be solved. The message was brief. "Shadow, your unique skills and experience are needed. Consulting basis only. Complete deniability. Interested." Night below it, a set of coordinates, not in Afghanistan this time, but somewhere closer to home. Somewhere children were being trafficked. Somewhere the conventional authorities couldn't or wouldn't act. Somewhere a ghost might make a difference. Catherine picked up the paper, studying it in the lamplight. She thought of Farida pursuing her dreams in London, of Jamil and Aliyah rebuilding their school, of the boy soldier she'd let walk away who might find a different path, of all the lives touched by single moments of choice. She reached for her phone, then paused. Through her apartment window, she could see the lights of the city spreading to the horizon. Somewhere out there, Brennan and the others were living their lives, forever changed by a mission that never happened. Somewhere Whitaker was probably telling war stories to young SEALs, carefully editing out the classified parts. Somewhere Sterling was mentoring female officers, teaching them that strength came in many forms. And somewhere children were suffering, waiting for someone with the skills and will to help them, someone who could be a ghost when needed, a warrior when required, a healer when possible. Catherine folded the paper carefully and placed it in her pocket. Tomorrow she would report for her shift at the ER, save lives in the light of day. But tonight she had a phone call to make, because some fights never ended, they just changed battlefields. And sometimes the most important wars were fought in shadows by people who didn't exist for stakes that would never make headlines. She dialed the number from memory. It rang once before connecting. "Knight, it's Shadow, I'm interested." As she spoke, her reflection caught in the window. Not the tired doctor from the bar, not the legendary sniper from Sandstorm, but something new. Someone who had learned that true strength wasn't about the ability to kill, but the wisdom to know when not to. Someone who understood that the hardest battles were fought within, and the greatest victories were the ones nobody saw. "After all," she said quietly, ending the call and preparing for whatever came next, "every ghost needs a purpose." Outside her window, the city lights twinkled like stars brought to earth, each one representing a life, a story, a possibility for redemption or ruin. And somewhere among them, moving between light and shadow, between past and future, between war and peace, a ghost prepared to walk again. Not the ghost of vengeance or violence, but of protection and purpose. Not the ghost that haunted, but the one that guarded. Not the ghost of who she'd been, but of who she'd chosen to become. Shadow was dead. Long live Shadow. This story ends here, but the journey continues. Many new adventures are waiting for you. And if you enjoyed it, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the bell. See you in the next story.